I remember that morning clearly. The sky was a dull silver, the kind that makes everything seem suspended, neither happy nor sad, just waiting. My apartment smelled faintly of jasmine tea and new flowers. On the table were my bridal earrings, a list of errands, and 2 registration tickets for tomorrow's ceremony. I was supposed to feel excitement, but instead, I felt a kind of stillness, like the world had taken a deep breath and was waiting to see what I'd do next. When Andre's message appeared on my screen, I stared at it for a long time. My mom invites you to dinner tonight, she really insists. 7 p.m. Will you come? There was nothing rude about it, but something in that phrasing, the formality, the insistence made my chest tighten. I knew that tone. It wasn't an invitation. It was an evaluation. I typed back quickly, "Of course, I'll be there." But when I set my phone down, the silence of my apartment grew heavy. Outside, workers were rolling coffee barrels for the cafe across the street. A cat walked the edge of the curb, unhurried. Life looked ordinary, yet inside, I felt the tension coil, subtle but constant. Andre's mother, Ludmila Sergeyevna, was never unkind in words, but she had that gift, the ability to make compliments sound like warnings. Every time we'd met, she'd examined me the way a jeweler examines a stone, for cracks invisible to the eye. Her husband, calm and quiet, usually softened her sharpness, but even his gentle smiles couldn't hide her scrutiny. I told myself it didn't matter. Tomorrow, I was marrying Andre, a man whose kindness had been a rare, patient light in my life. But part of me knew, this dinner wasn't about food, it was about position. So I called my closest friend, Marina. She answered on the second ring. "Alina, you sound tense, what's wrong?" Andre's mother invited me for dinner, tonight. She sighed knowingly. The final inspection. Her voice carried humor, but also caution. "Stay calm," she said. "You don't need to prove anything. Ask them about themselves. Smile when you must. Remember, you're not auditioning for a role." I tried to laugh. "Easy for you to say. You're not the one facing Ludmila the Terrible. You'll be fine. You've got the strength and the smarts. And if she tries anything, remember you speak Italian better than she thinks." That made me smile. She was right. My late grandmother had taught me Italian soft vowels over tea, long afternoons of stories and song. Ludmila didn't know that. Maybe tonight, if things got cruel, that hidden language would be my armor. After the call, I stood by the window, watching a pair of sparrows hop along the ledge. I thought about how calm they looked, no wedding, no expectations, no mothers-in-law with measuring eyes. Just the simple rhythm of existing. The rest of the day unfolded quietly. I picked up the bouquet, checked the playlist with the host, and took Andre's suit to the cleaner. He called once, his voice bright, asking if I'd eaten. I said yes. I didn't mention the weight I felt sitting just beneath my ribs. By evening, I stood before the mirror in a navy dress and gray shoes. My hair was tied low, the way Andre liked it. I wanted to look respectful, not defensive. As I fastened my earrings, I studied my reflection. Not a bride, not a warrior, just a woman trying to belong somewhere she wasn't yet welcome. At exactly 7, I stood before their apartment door. My pulse thudded softly in my ears. Andre's father opened first, tall, slightly stooped, his eyes kind. "Good evening, Alina," he said with quiet sincerity. The smell of roasted vegetables and lemon greeted me as he led me inside. Ludmila appeared from the kitchen, her posture perfect, blouse crisp, pearls gleaming like armor. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. "Alina, hello. You look so delicate. Aren't you cold in that dress?" "Good evening," I replied gently. "I'm fine. Thank you for inviting me." Andre entered just then, relief in his face. "Hey, you made it!" He placed a warm hand on my back, the tension in the room easing for a moment. Dinner began politely. The tablecloth was white and starched, the silverware aligned with military precision. Ludmila asked about my parents, my work, my plans, all with that mild tone that hides blades beneath politeness. Her husband asked what I liked to read. I mentioned poets Akhmatova, Rilke, and his eyes lit briefly. Andre shared a story from his childhood about burning pancakes in that very kitchen. Laughter circled the table like a polite echo. But beneath it all, I felt the quiet weight of being observed. By dessert, Andre stepped out to answer a call from the wedding host. His father went to the kitchen to fetch tea, and suddenly, it was just Ludmila and me. The silence thickened like syrup. She leaned toward her husband's returning figure and murmured something in Italian, her tone amused, dismissive. They both laughed softly, glancing at me with polite curiosity, as if at a child who wouldn't understand. But I did. Every word. The laughter burned like frost. Not because it was cruel, but because it was calculated. A test, one final measure before the marriage. I took a slow breath. My grandmother's voice floated up in memory. Never raise your voice when you hold the truth. Just let it shine. So I stood, walked around the table, gently took Ludmila's hand in mine, warm against her cool fingers. And with the calm of someone who has nothing to prove, I said in fluent, measured Italian. I understood everything. You don't have to worry. I won't ask for a single penny. I know how to care for myself and for the man I love. The air went still. Her eyes widened, surprise flashing into irritation, then confusion. Her husband froze mid-pour, realizing the weight of her words now exposed. I smiled softly, still holding her hand. No triumph, just quiet clarity. Andre walked back in, cheerful, unaware. Everything okay? He asked. I released her hand and said, perfect. And somehow, it was. I wish I could say the room exploded, or that silverware clattered to the floor, or that someone shouted. But power rarely performs in public. It retreats. After my words in Italian, the light over the dining table hummed, the clock kept ticking, and dignity put its coat back on and took its seat. Ludmila withdrew her hand slowly, as if I'd set down a glass that might still spill. The glossy calm returned to her mouth, but the edges weren't as sharp. Her husband cleared his throat in that careful way men do when they've heard a truth and are pretending they didn't. Tea? He asked the room gently, as if speaking to the atmosphere instead of to us. Please, I said, and took my seat again. I smoothed my dress. My fingers were steady. It surprised me. My heart had braced for a tremor that never came. I looked at the bowl of olives, the thin slices of salmon, the way the tablecloth held its white like a promise. I thought, respect is quiet too. Andre returned, smiling. Host is happy. First dance is confirmed. He sat, reading our faces like a child reading weather. Everything okay? I reached for my water. Everything's fine. For a moment, the air felt fragile. If anyone exhaled too loudly, it might crack. Then Ludmila lifted the teapot with a careful grace that reminded me of theater performers hitting their mark. Alina, she said, voice even, do you take sugar? 1 lump, I answered, and the smallest smile flickered in her eyes, something like respect's first shy cousin. She passed me the cup. The tea smelled faintly of bergamot. I let the steam wash over my face and thought of my grandmother. I could almost hear her say, tea is a peace treaty served in cups you don't own. Conversation resumed along safe pathways. Ludmila asked about the florist. I named the street and the woman with blue nails who tied my bouquet ribbon twice because the first knot didn't feel lucky. Andre's father asked about my work. I described the project phases without sounding ambitious enough to frighten anyone. Andre told a story about how he once welded a picture frame in a class and hung it crooked for a year out of loyalty to the mistake. We laughed. Laughter returned like a cautious bird, ready to fly at the first sudden move. Through it all, I felt something inside me settle, like a suitcase finally placed on the proper shelf. I hadn't won, there was no scoreboard, but I'd stopped auditioning. That, I realized, was the point. After dessert, pale lemon tart with a neat line of zest. Andre's father brought out a tin of hard candies he said he'd kept since the year. Andre broke his arm. The doctor gave him one, he said with a soft pride that made me ache, and he stopped crying to suck on it. He offered the tin to me first. A quiet invitation. I chose a candy. Thank you. It clicked against my teeth. Childhood is sometimes just the sound of something small that makes pain wait. The evening closed itself with careful knots. We stood. Chairs slid back. Polite phrases were exchanged, like receipts, proof of purchase for good manners. At the door, Ludmila's hand lighted on my forearm, Not possessive, not warm, simply present. Tomorrow will be busy, she said softly, eyes holding mine without challenging them. Rest, Alina. I will, I answered, and meant it. The hallway was cooler. The elevator, a small brass-lit box where reflections wobbled in the metal. Andre pressed the button and tilted his head at me. What did I miss? He murmured. The air changed. I smiled. Nothing important, just translations. He squeezed my hand and leaned his shoulder into mine. You're remarkable. We said goodbye to his parents in the lobby, the kind of goodbye that leaves neither promise nor residue. Outside, evening had collapsed fully into night, and the street wore its lights like jewelry. The city wasn't loud, it was steady. The bakery on the corner had switched off its display, leaving one tray of unsold biscuits behind the glass like a still life. Andre hailed a car, but I shook my head. I'll walk. I need the air. You go. You've got the seating chart to finalize with the host. He hesitated. Text me when you're in. I will. We kissed like people who know the day after a storm is brighter because of the storm, not in spite of it. Then he left in a blur of taillights, and I began the brief walk home. Night sharpened the city's edges. A bicycle clicked past me, chain humming. On a second-floor balcony, a woman shook out a towel, stars of moisture flashing under a street lamp. Somewhere, music unfurled an old Italian ballad, sentimental and brave, the kind of song that doesn't ask permission to be tender. I passed the cafe that stored the morning's coffee barrels. Now its windows glowed amber, and two students argued softly about a film that one of them swore had changed his life. I wanted to pause and tell them that most things that change you don't announce themselves, but I kept walking, a small smile tucked under my breath. By the time I climbed my stairs, I felt rinsed of performance. I locked the door, slipped off my shoes, and leaned my forehead against the cool wood for a second. My apartment was exactly as I'd left it. The list, the earrings, the clean quiet. I put the kettle on, out of habit more than thirst, and sat at the table. I thought through the evening like a seamstress checking a hem. Where had I spoken too much? Too little? Where had I been kind? Where had I simply been correct? My grandmother's words hovered again. Correctness is a poor substitute for kindness, but sometimes you need a coat before you can learn to love the winter. I texted Andre. Home, tea, all good. He typed back almost instantly. I knew it. See you in the morning. I love you. I wrote, me too. Sleep. Steam curled from the kettle and fogged the glass of the window. I drew a little heart in the mist, then wiped it away. Tomorrow was for hearts. Tonight was for quiet. The city kept breathing. A siren far away rose and fell, then dissolved into the ordinary night. I turned off the kettle. I didn't need the tea anymore. I needed stillness. I undressed, folded the navy dress over the chair, and smoothed the fabric like a peace offering to myself. In the bathroom mirror, I met my own eyes and recognized them, the woman I have always been when no one is measuring me. Not a bride, not a warrior. Just a person with a spine, a heart, and languages spoken and unspoken that no one can take. I washed my face, moisturized, tied my hair into a loose knot, and slipped into bed with my notebook. I opened to a blank page and wrote the smallest sentence I could think of that still felt true. I am enough. Then I added another line, smaller still. I am ready. I closed the notebook and set it on the nightstand. Before switching off the light, I glanced at my phone. A new email banner teased the top of the screen, an unfamiliar address with a subject line that ended in Milan. For a second, the room rearranged itself around that word, like furniture shuffled to make space for a piano. My pulse picked up 1, 2, then level. I didn't open it. Not because I was afraid of the contents, but because I suddenly wanted to choose joy on purpose, not urgency by accident. I put the phone face down and let the quiet hold me. Tomorrow, there would be rice and laughter and signatures and photographs where my smile would be my own. Tomorrow, there would be choices masquerading as rituals, and vows that sounded like the simplest truth in the world. I choose you. Tonight, I chose sleep. The kind of sleep you get when you've walked through a room without bowing and left it in one piece. I turned off the lamp. Darkness entered gently, like someone who knows your house and doesn't bump into anything. Somewhere between one breath and the next, I wondered briefly if Ludmila would dream of me speaking Italian or if she'd dream of her son as a boy holding a hard candy, not crying anymore. Perhaps we would all dream in a language that forgives what pride cannot. I slept. And when I woke hours later, to a pale skein of dawn, the word Milan was still waiting where I'd left it, bright as a coin on the table. But that was tomorrow's task. Today, I would marry the man I loved, with every language I owned, and none I owed. When I think back now, I realize power shifts quietly. It doesn't announce itself with thunder or applause. It moves like breath, rearranging the air without sound. That night, after I spoke in Italian, the room had changed. I felt it, though no one would ever admit it. Ludmila's smile faltered just enough to expose a heartbeat of surprise. Her husband looked down into his teacup, studying the reflection of the light instead of the moment. And Andre's sweet, unassuming Andre had walked back into the living room, carrying the simple warmth of someone who still believed the evening had gone well. I stayed seated, holding my cup carefully so the teaspoon wouldn't tremble. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me nervous. The air smelled faintly of bergamot and roasted salmon, a strangely elegant scent for a battlefield. Andre, sensing nothing, leaned close to whisper. The host confirmed the first dance our song. Our song. For a second, that phrase brushed my heart, soft and anchoring. The world returned to its proper scale. We exchanged polite thanks, small words that cost nothing but kept the peace. When the time came to leave, Ludmila rose with a grace that would have impressed diplomats. "Tomorrow is an important day," she said, voice cool but steady. "You should get some rest." "Thank you," I replied. "Dinner was lovely." She nodded, the same way one acknowledges a worthy opponent after a duel. Her husband, always the gentler spirit, helped me with my coat and said quietly, "Take care of each other." Outside, the hallway light flickered once, a soft, almost cinematic gesture, and I exhaled. I had walked through the fire and still smelled like myself. The night air was calm, rinsed clean after a light rain. I walked home instead of calling a cab. My heels clicked rhythmically against the pavement. Each step felt like punctuation after a long, complicated sentence. The sky had the washed-out gray of brushed steel. In the window of the florist shop, I saw my reflection, a woman with her shoulders squared, eyes steady. Not a girl trying to impress her future mother-in-law, not a guest begging for acceptance. Just a person who had decided she wouldn't speak softer to be liked. It wasn't arrogance, it was survival. Back home, I slipped off my shoes and poured myself a small glass of wine. I sat at the table and thought about Andre's parents, his father's quiet empathy, Ludmila's constant vigilance. And Andre caught between them, trying to build peace without realizing that sometimes peace means taking a side. My phone buzzed. A message from Andre. "You were amazing tonight. I could tell something happened. Tell me tomorrow. Sleep now." I smiled, a tired, real smile. I typed back, "Tonight, just sleep." But I didn't sleep. I opened my laptop instead. The screen's glow filled the small kitchen, painting everything in silver light. I clicked through my unread emails, bills, subscriptions, a notification from the travel agency. Then I saw it. Subject: "Congratulations, Alina, your Milan project offer." My heart skipped. I clicked it open. The email was formal but warm. "We're pleased to offer you a position for a 1-year project in Milan. Full salary, housing assistance for 6 months, and relocation support. Please confirm within 3 days." Milan, Italy. The country of my grandmother's lullabies. The language that had just saved me. I leaned back, staring at the screen, then let out a long breath. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Ludmila was mocking me in Italian, a future in Italy had quietly opened its door. I imagined Andre's reaction. He'd be proud, maybe a little scared but proud. Yet I also imagined Ludmila's reaction. So, she's taking him away from his work, his country, his family. That thought stung, not because she'd be wrong to worry, but because she'd think my ambition was theft. I turned off the laptop and sat in the dark, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. My mind started sorting itself like cards. Love, ambition, loyalty, fear. Which hand was I supposed to play first? A small part of me wanted to hide the offer until after the wedding to hold our peace, to keep the weekend unspoiled. But another voice whispered, "You've already been silent long enough." I looked at the clock. Midnight. Less than 24 hours before the ceremony. I took out my notebook, the same one where I'd written, "I am enough," and drew 2 columns. On the left I wrote, Milan freedom, growth, adventure, work I love, see on weekends, independence. On the right I wrote, here's safety, family, traditions, friends, language, everything familiar. Between the 2 columns I wrote a single line. Who will I be with there? Who will I be here? I didn't have an answer yet, but for the first time in months, I felt like the question belonged to me alone. I closed the notebook, set it beside the laptop, and turned off the lamp. The city outside was asleep, the quiet hum of distant cars like a heartbeat I could finally match. In bed, the last thing I thought before sleep took me was this. If respect can't be given, maybe it must be earned by walking away from where it isn't. The next morning I woke early. The world was still gray, but my mind was clear. I made oatmeal, tied my hair, and sat by the window as the first thin light spilled across the floor. I dialed Andre. "Morning," he said, voice soft, tired. "Morning. Can you come by before the registration? I need to talk." "Something wrong?" "No," I said. "Something right." He laughed. "Okay, I'll be there in an hour." I hung up and looked at the email again. My reflection glowed faintly on the laptop screen, a woman on the edge of something vast, something earned. I didn't yet know how Andre would respond, whether he'd see Milan as opportunity or betrayal. But I knew one thing. Whatever came next, I wouldn't speak smaller just to fit inside someone else's comfort. I was done shrinking to make room for someone's fear. And for the first time, I felt ready not just to marry, but to live. Andre arrived just after 8. The morning light was soft, the kind that paints everything in quiet clarity. He looked a little rumpled, tie in his pocket, hair damp from the shower, but when he saw me sitting at the kitchen table, the smile that spread across his face was unguarded, pure. The kind of smile that had made me fall for him in the first place. "You look serious," he said, placing his jacket on the chair. "Please tell me the florist didn't mess up the bouquet." I laughed softly. "No, the flowers are fine. It's something else." He sat across from me, and I slid the laptop toward him. The email was still open. "Read it." He leaned closer, scanning the text. His eyes moved quickly, then slowed. His lips parted slightly. When he finished, he looked up, the silence between us, holding both pride and uncertainty. "Milan," he said finally. "You got it." I nodded. "A 1-year project, full pay, housing for 6 months. It's everything I've been working toward." But, he repeated quietly. "I didn't want to hide it from you. I didn't want you to think it changes how I feel. I just need to be honest." He ran a hand through his hair and looked at the window, where morning rain had started tapping gently on the glass. For a while, neither of us spoke. Outside, the world continued its ordinary rhythm, buses sighing at stops, someone sweeping the sidewalk, the hum of the city waking up. Finally, he turned back to me. "You know what the best thing about you is?" "I'm afraid to ask." "You tell the truth, even when it makes things complicated." He reached across the table and took my hand. "You deserve this, Alina. You've worked for it, you've earned it, and maybe this is something we do together." I blinked. "You'd come with me?" He nodded slowly. "I'll figure it out. I can move some projects online, maybe find something there. It's not forever, it's just a step." For a moment, I couldn't breathe, not because of the words, but because of the steadiness behind them. The simple, unshowy love of someone choosing you without fear. "Andre," I whispered, "are you sure?" "I'm sure about you. That's enough." He smiled, then added with a small laugh. "Besides, I need to make sure you don't get lost in Milan and end up working 20 hours a day." We both laughed, and the tension in my chest melted. That afternoon, as I packed a few last-minute things for the ceremony, I thought about how love isn't always fireworks. It's often decisions made quietly in kitchens over lukewarm coffee. I thought about my parents, who had stayed together for 30 years, Not because everything was easy, but because every argument ended with someone saying, "Let's fix it, not flee it." Maybe that's what Andre and I were doing, fixing, not fleeing. When I arrived at the bridal salon for the final fitting, my reflection in the mirror looked different. Not just because of the white dress or the soft curls pinned at my neck, but because I looked certain. I wasn't waiting for permission anymore. As the seamstress adjusted the hem, my phone buzzed. A message from Marina. "How was last night's dinner with the dragons?" I grinned and typed back. I spoke fluent fire. Then I added, "Also, I might be moving to Milan." Her reply came seconds later. "What? Girl, your movie never stops." She wasn't wrong. That evening, I went to meet Andre at the registry office for the rehearsal. The room smelled faintly of fresh paint and tulips. Our names were written neatly on a clipboard. Everything felt organized, calm, like life was politely waiting for us to step in. Andre walked in, still adjusting his tie. "You sure about everything?" he asked. "About you, yes," I said. "About life, well, that's always a moving target." He laughed softly. "I'll take that as a compliment." We sat on the wooden bench in the hallway, hands intertwined. People passed by, other couples, friends, a janitor humming to himself. I leaned my head on Andre's shoulder and whispered, "Do you think your mother will ever forgive me for speaking Italian?" He smiled into my hair. "Honestly, probably not, but she'll never underestimate you again." The warmth of his arm around me felt like an answer to a question I hadn't asked. That night, as I packed the final box of wedding essentials, rings, makeup, the speech cards, I found myself glancing at the Milan email again. It felt unreal, like a bridge between two versions of myself. One rooted in this small apartment, this city, this life I built carefully. The other standing on the edge of a new skyline. I imagined Andre and me walking through Milan's narrow streets, the smell of espresso and fresh rain in the air, church bells echoing through stone alleys. I imagined Ludmila's face when she learned we were leaving, her mixture of worry and pride tangled together. And somewhere deep inside, I hoped this next step would teach us all something about love, the kind that doesn't bind or break, but bends just enough to grow. Before bed, I wrote in my notebook again, "Tomorrow we say yes." Then, below it, "And after that we learn what yes really means." I closed the notebook, turned off the lamp, and whispered to the darkness, "Milan can wait one more day." Morning broke soft and silver, like the world itself had decided to move slowly for us. The wedding day. I remember standing by the window, still in my robe, watching fog lift off the street below. There was a peace in it, a pause before the noise. The kind of morning that feels like an inhale you never want to release. Andre texted first. "Don't be late, Mrs. Soon-to-be." I smiled, typing back. "I never am." You, on the other hand. The little typing dots appeared, then vanished, then came back. It felt like we were already married, that quiet shorthand of love built through 1,000 small jokes. The registry hall buzzed with murmurs and perfume. My bridesmaids fluttered around me like pastel birds, fixing curls, straightening veils, whispering about the flowers. My mother pressed her hands to my cheeks and whispered, "Breathe." I nodded. "I'm fine." And I was. For the first time, I felt completely myself, no performance, no borrowed smile, just me, ready. When Andre arrived, the air seemed to still. He looked devastatingly nervous and proud all at once, his tie slightly crooked, his hair refusing to obey. I loved him even more for that imperfection. The ceremony was simple, the kind that doesn't need orchestras or stained glass to make it sacred. Just two people saying yes with their full hearts. "Do you, Andre, take Alina?" "I do." "Do you, Alina, take Andre?" "I do." Our voices met in the space between us, small words, enormous weight. When we signed the papers, his hand brushed mine, warm and steady. I looked up and saw his father smiling softly in the back row. His mother Ludmila stood beside him, her posture perfect, her face unreadable. As we stepped out of the hall, guests showered us with rice and laughter. I remember the sound of it, the way each grain seemed to hit my hair like tiny blessings. The reception was held in a modest restaurant, warm with light and clinking glasses. The host's voice floated above the hum of conversation, introducing toasts and laughter. I caught fragments. Beautiful couple. May your love grow. Milan. Future. Every do. Yes, Milan was already weaving itself into the story. Marina raised her glass first. To Alina and Andre, may they always listen to each other before the world tells them how to live. Andre squeezed my hand under the table. She knows us too well, he whispered. Later, during the first dance, the music swelled gently, a soft Italian waltz we'd chosen weeks ago, before the offer had even arrived. A coincidence that now felt like fate. His hand rested on my waist, firm and protective. You still want Milan? He murmured. Yes, I said, but only if we both go. He nodded, eyes never leaving mine. Then we'll go. For those 3 minutes, the world disappeared. No families, no expectations, just the quiet rhythm of two people deciding to walk forward together. When the song ended, the applause was thunderous, but all I could hear was my heartbeat, steady and certain. During dessert, Ludmila pulled Andre aside. I saw it from across the room, her fingers on his sleeve, her expression tight. Her words were quiet, but her body language spoke volumes. Andre's face shifted from calm to cautious. He nodded several times, then said something short that made her blink, startled. He didn't raise his voice. He just stood his ground, then walked back toward me. Everything all right? I asked softly. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that hides fatigue. She just needed reassurance. Again. About Milan? About everything. He sighed, eyes flicking toward her across the room. She doesn't see it as opportunity. She sees it as loss. I touched his hand. Maybe one day she'll understand it's both, and that both can still be beautiful. He nodded, pulling me closer. I love how you always find the middle ground between kindness and war. I smiled faintly. That's called survival. Later that night, when the guests left, and the laughter thinned to silence, Andre and I sat in our small apartment surrounded by flowers and unopened gifts. My veil hung over the chair like an exhausted guest. You know, Andre said, pouring 2 glasses of champagne. We could have just gone to the courthouse and signed papers in jeans. I laughed. Maybe, but then your mother wouldn't have had the chance to critique my posture. He grinned. True, she'll recover. Eventually. We clinked glasses. The sound echoed softly in the quiet room. So, he said, eyes serious now. About Milan. Are you ready to tell her? We'll have to, I said. Soon, but not tonight. I looked around the room, the boxes, the shoes, the faint scent of lilies. Let's have one night where it's just us. No plans, no wars, just quiet. He nodded. Quiet sounds perfect. That night, we didn't make promises. We didn't talk about the future. We just existed side by side, hands intertwined, the city humming softly outside. And somewhere between the laughter and the silence, I realized that love doesn't begin with the words I do. It begins with the quiet that follows the moment you both stay. Tomorrow, there would be questions, maybe battles, maybe tears. But tonight, there was peace. And that was enough. The first week after the wedding felt like standing in sunlight while knowing rain was waiting at the edge of the sky. Every morning, Andre and I woke, tangled in new routines, shared coffee, quick breakfasts, quiet laughter. But beneath the warmth, we both felt it, the unspoken countdown to telling his parents about Milan. We tried to delay it. We talked about gifts, about thank you cards, about rearranging furniture. But truth has a way of sitting in the room with you, waiting, arms crossed. It happened the following Sunday. Ludmila had called that morning, her tone careful, neutral, the kind that makes you hold your breath. Come for lunch, she said. I made Andre's favorite. I could tell by the edge in her voice she already knew something was coming. Their apartment was spotless, as always, polished floors, curtains drawn perfectly, the faint scent of lemon cleaner and perfume. On the table sat a salad that glistened with oil, bread cut in precise diagonals, glasses placed like soldiers. Ludmila didn't greet me with her usual remark about my dress. She simply said, "Sit." Andre's father smiled kindly, motioning for me to take the chair opposite him. The kettle hissed softly in the kitchen. For a few moments, the only sound was the tick of the clock. Finally, she spoke. You're leaving. It wasn't a question. Andre nodded. Yes, Mom. We're going to Milan. It's a year-long project for Alina. And You're taking my son away, she interrupted, her voice sharp, thin as glass. I felt the sting, but I didn't flinch. I'm not taking anyone, I said gently. I'm going with him. He's an adult. It's his choice too. She gave a small, humorless laugh. You always speak so beautifully, but when it all falls apart, you'll come back to this house asking for help. Her words hung heavy. Andre froze, torn between wanting to defend me and not wanting to ignite war. So I took a breath and answered for both of us. If it falls apart, we'll get back up ourselves, I said. I know how to live on little. I know how to work with my hands, with my head. I'm not leaving to prove anything. I'm leaving to grow. And if things go wrong, I won't ask you for money. Not because I'm proud, but because I don't ever want to hear that I wasn't enough. The words came out calm, even, but inside, my heart was trembling like glass before it sings. Ludmila's chair scraped sharply against the floor as she stood. Are you insulting me? I met her eyes. No, I'm refusing to justify myself any longer. The room went silent. The clock ticked louder, as if filling in the space where civility used to live. Andre's father looked between us, then quietly rose and placed a hand on his wife's shoulder. Enough, he said softly. They've chosen their path. Let them walk it. She turned away, staring out the window, shoulders tight. I caught the faintest tremor in her breath, not rage, but fear. The kind a mother hides when she realizes her son no longer needs her permission to live. I felt sorry for her, truly, because I understood it wasn't control she wanted. It was reassurance that she still mattered. The following days blurred into the rhythm of leaving. Boxes lined the hallway, dresses folded into vacuum bags, books into neat stacks, documents sealed in plastic. Andre worked late every night, handing off projects, scheduling video calls, tying loose ends. Sometimes he'd come home exhausted, sit on the floor beside the half-packed boxes, and simply lean his head against my knee. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. Silence became its own language, one that said, I'm tired, but I'm here. Our friends visited often, bringing takeout and tiny gifts. Marina brought a notebook wrapped in brown paper. For your new life, she said. Write in it when you're scared. It'll remind you that you've always made it through. I smiled. You're assuming I'll have time to breathe. Then write short sentences, she said. They're harder to lie with. We laughed, but when she hugged me goodbye that night, I felt tears prick my throat. The week before departure, Ludmila called. Her voice was quieter now, softened by something she wouldn't name. Come for lunch, she said. No arguments. When we arrived, she'd made Andre's favorite salad again. She didn't mention Milan, didn't lecture, didn't sigh. She simply listened as Andre told stories about packing chaos and missing documents. I caught her smile once, quick, unwilling but real. At the end of the meal, she folded her napkin carefully and said, almost to the table, I don't know how to live without your Sunday visits. Andre reached across and took her hand. You'll hear from me every week. We'll video call. You'll get tired of seeing my face. She nodded, tears shining but unshed. Just, don't vanish. We're not vanishing, I said softly. We're just changing the distance between us. She looked at me, then really looked, and for the first time, her gaze wasn't measuring me. It was searching, maybe even understanding. At the airport, the air buzzed with overlapping goodbyes, rolling suitcases, children crying, laughter, announcements in 3 languages. Andre checked the luggage while I clutched the envelope with our tickets, my fingers damp from holding them too tightly. Ludmila and her husband arrived just before boarding. She looked smaller than I remembered, as if the decision had carved out the space between us faster than time could. His father hugged us first. His embrace was steady, his voice low. Live, he said. You only get one life. Don't waste it living by someone else's decisions. Then Ludmila stepped forward. For a moment, she didn't speak. Her lips pressed together, eyes shining but defiant. When she finally did, her voice was thin, almost fragile. Take care of him, she said. He doesn't always know how to ask when he needs something. I smiled gently. I will. And he takes care of me too. Something flickered in her eyes, then a faint relief, or maybe trust trying to be born. She nodded once. We passed through security. I turned back one last time. She was still standing there, one hand over her heart, the other clutching her husband's sleeve. I wanted to wave, but instead, I whispered under my breath, "Thank you for raising him brave." On the plane, Andre took my hand and kissed my knuckles. "We did it," he said. Outside the window, clouds swallowed the city, the ground falling away in slow motion. Buildings, roads, fir trees, small lives all drifting into mist. Above it, everything was bright. The horizon glowed gold, endless and open. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't anxious. I wasn't fighting. I wasn't proving. I was simply moving forward. And for the first time, that felt enough like victory. Milan didn't greet us with fanfare. It met us softly with the low hum of trams, the scent of espresso drifting from corner cafes, and a wind that carried both promise and disorientation. The sky was a pale blue veil stretched over terracotta roofs. I remember stepping out of the taxi, suitcase in hand, and thinking, we really did it. The company had arranged a small apartment for us near Porta Venezia. It was bright and modest, with white walls that caught the light, and a tiny balcony overflowing with flower boxes empty for now, but full of possibility. The landlady had left a kettle, 2 mugs, and a handwritten note in careful Italian. Benvenuti a casa. Welcome home. That first night, we slept on fresh sheets that smelled faintly of lavender, detergent, exhaustion, and relief. I woke once around 3 a.m. to the sound of a tram passing by, and Andre's arm draped across me, warm and heavy. For a second, I thought of Ludmila, probably awake too, staring at her quiet kitchen, tracing the absence of her son like a missing heartbeat. My first day at the office was a blur of new names, bright smiles, and too many double-cheek kisses. The HR coordinator, Francesca, spoke rapid Italian and then switched to English halfway through. "You'll find Milan fast but kind," she said. "We live between deadlines and cappuccinos." They gave me a desk by a window that overlooked a narrow street lined with bakeries and scooters. My project folder waited neatly on the table, 6 months of work condensed into graphs, outlines, and expectations. By noon, I was already lost in diagrams. But when Francesca placed a tiny espresso cup on my desk, I realized something. No matter where you go, kindness looks the same. It arrives unannounced and smells like coffee. That evening, I came home to the sound of Andre muttering in a mix of Italian and English, surrounded by open folders. He looked up with an apologetic grin. "I may have accidentally agreed to advise a local accounting startup," he said. "They needed help with numbers. I needed help with purpose." I laughed, setting down my bag. "So, you've already found your new project." "And a terrible espresso machine," he said, pointing at the sputtering thing on the counter. I crossed the kitchen, kissed his cheek and whispered, "We'll learn." Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of our new life began to take shape. Mornings were simple, espresso, croissants, short walks to work. Evenings were filled with stories. I'd tell him about my coworker's chaotic English. He'd tell me about a client who refused to use Excel but trusted the stars for tax deadlines. We were building something fragile yet strong, a shared language that had nothing to do with words. On Saturdays, we walked through open markets where old women sold herbs wrapped in paper cones. Once, an elderly man handed me a bundle of rosemary for luck. I tucked it into my bag, smiling. Later that evening, I placed it on our windowsill. Its scent filled the room for days. There was peace here, a kind of peace that doesn't erase difficulty but coexists with it. We laughed more, we talked slower. And sometimes, when I caught Andre watching me across the table, his expression was different, softer, prouder, as if he could finally breathe without permission. One evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Ludmila. "How are you?" Just that. No prelude, no punctuation. I stared at it for a moment before replying. "Working. Learning. Trying." Her response came hours later, a photo. Andre's father standing by the stove, ladle in hand, stirring a pot of soup. The caption read, "He's learning to cook your soup." I smiled so wide my cheeks hurt. I sent back a single red heart. That night, I showed Andre the picture. He laughed softly and shook his head. My father hasn't cooked in 20 years. People surprise us, I said. He kissed the top of my head. You surprise her the most. December crept in quietly, wrapping Milan in mist. Streets glittered with lights strung across balconies. Markets smelled of roasted chestnuts, and our tiny apartment felt warmer than it had any right to. One Friday evening, I came home to find a thick envelope waiting by the door. The handwriting was unmistakable. Ludmila's, neat and deliberate. Inside were 2 pages written on cream stationery. The first read, I'm trying to adjust. Andre was always my anchor, and now he's far. I didn't understand how much of myself I'd built around his nearness. I see now that my words at dinner were foolish. I thought I was protecting him from disappointment. I realized I was only protecting myself from loneliness. The second page said, Will you come home for Christmas? Even for a few days? I'd like to see you both. There will be oranges, and no lectures. I read it twice, heart swelling with a complicated tenderness. When I handed it to Andre, he went silent. His thumb brushed over his mother's signature. Let's go, he said finally. She needs to see we're fine, that we're not running, we're living. We arrived home a week later, greeted by snow and the smell of oranges. Andre's father met us at the door, his smile brighter than I'd ever seen it. Ludmila stood behind him, stiff but trying. She looked at me, then at Andre, and said softly, You look thinner, I'll feed you. We all laughed. The tension cracked like ice under warmth. That night, as the 4 of us sat around the table, I noticed something extraordinary. Ludmila listened, really listened. She asked about Milan, about my work, about our apartment. Her tone was careful but sincere. Later, when we were alone in the kitchen, she fumbled with the sugar bowl, spilling a little onto the counter. I handed her a napkin. We both laughed. Then she said, voice quiet but steady, I didn't mean to offend you that night. I was afraid. Afraid of losing my son, of being left behind. I confuse protection with control sometimes. I nodded. I make mistakes too, but Andre and we learned to talk. That's what matters. She looked up, eyes glistening. Then, slowly, in hesitant Italian, she said, Sto ancora imparando, ma voglio parlare la tua lingua anche io. I'm still learning, but I want to speak your language too. Something inside me softened completely. It was more than an apology, it was an offering. We hugged, and for the first time, it wasn't awkward. That Christmas was quiet but full laughter, cooking, stories retold, new ones shared. Ludmila gifted me a scarf she'd knitted herself. It's not perfect, she said. It's beautiful, I replied. When we boarded the flight back to Milan, I looked out the window and saw her standing by the terminal glass, waving small, fragile, but smiling. And in that moment, I realized, forgiveness doesn't always come as a word. Sometimes it's just a look that says, you may go, and I'll still love you from here. Back in Milan, the city greeted us with sun after rain. Andre unpacked, humming softly. I placed the scarf over the chair and breathed in the faint smell of home. Our lives felt quieter now. Not perfect, but right. Love, I was learning, isn't built in declarations or grand gestures. It's built in translation, learning each other's languages, again and again. And that, more than anything, felt like forever. Spring returned to Milan like a soft apology, slow mornings of golden light, streets washed clean by brief rain, and the first scent of wisteria creeping through open windows. The world felt new, but in that quiet, steady kind of way that comes after a storm finally ends. Andre and I had found our rhythm. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. He worked part-time consulting for local firms, his laptop always surrounded by half-drunk coffee cups and hand-drawn charts. I had grown into my new role confident now, fluent in a language that had once frightened me. My office desk bloomed with sticky notes in 2 languages, reminders, ideas, small fragments of life that belonged to both worlds. We didn't talk much about the past anymore. It was there like a book already read, sitting on the shelf behind us. But some nights, when the city went quiet and the trams stopped running, I'd remember that dinner table, that smirk, those words in Italian, and I'd smile. Because that moment, the one meant to diminish me, had been the start of everything. One evening in early May, I came home to find an envelope on our kitchen table. The company's logo in the corner, my name printed neatly. Inside was a letter from the director. A promotion. They wanted me to lead a small department with a 3-year contract, 4 team members, and quarterly travel back to Russia. I stared at the words, heart pounding. I'd imagined this, but not so soon, not yet. Andre came in just then, smelling faintly of rain and printer ink. "What's that look?" he asked, setting down his keys. I handed him the letter. He read it once, then again. His expression flickered, pride first, then something else, quieter and harder to name. He set the letter down carefully. "You deserve this," he said softly. "Completely." I searched his face. "But?" He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "No, but I'll have to adjust again. Find new clients, travel less. You'll be flying back and forth. It'll be different." I reached across the table, took his hand. "I haven't accepted yet," I said. "We'll decide together. I don't want my success to turn into your silence." He looked at me for a long moment, really looked, and then smiled. "You always think you need to protect me," he said. "But I'm fine, proud even. I want you to say yes, and I'll find my next step too." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. It's easier to walk beside someone when both of you are moving forward." He squeezed my hand once more and grinned. "Also, if you take the job, I get to brag about being married to a department head." We both laughed, the kind of laughter that comes from exhaustion and love, stitched together. The next morning, I signed the contract. Andre showed up at the office with pastries and a single white rose. My team clapped when he walked in, teasing that he was the proud husband of the boss. That night, we celebrated quietly at home. Pasta, wine, music low in the background. I wore the scarf Ludmila had knitted me, soft gray wool, slightly uneven, warm as understanding. After dinner, we called our families. Ludmila appeared on the video screen, smiling with the cautious pride of someone learning to celebrate without controlling. "So our Alina is a manager now," she said. "Head of department," Andre corrected, teasing. "Ah," Ludmila said, pretending to be unimpressed. "Then I'll have to study Italian harder to keep up." Her husband raised his glass from the background. "To strong women," he said. And for the first time, Ludmila didn't argue. She just nodded and smiled. Autumn came sooner than we expected. The city smelled of roasted chestnuts again, and our balcony bloomed with herbs we'd planted together. I'd gotten used to my new responsibilities, longer hours, bigger meetings, and a small team that felt like family. Then, one morning, I took a test in the bathroom, hands trembling. 2 pink lines appeared. I just stood there, staring at them, the world shrinking into that tiny window of plastic and color. Andre found me a few minutes later, sitting on the floor, still holding the test. "Alina?" he whispered. I looked up at him, half laughing, half crying. "I think we're about to get promoted again." He blinked, then laughed that pure, unfiltered laugh I'd fallen in love with, and knelt beside me. His hands shook as he took the test from mine. He stared at it for a long time, then pressed his forehead against mine, both of us trembling and laughing at once. We sat there on the cold bathroom tiles, saying nothing. Sometimes joy doesn't need language. That evening, we called our parents. Ludmila answered first. "You're calling early," she said, suspicious as ever. "Is everything all right?" Andre smiled nervously. "Better than all right. Mom, you're going to be a grandmother." For a moment, silence. Then she covered her mouth with both hands. Oh, Andre." Her voice cracked. "And Alina," she added, eyes wet. "Take care of yourself. And, I promise, no lectures this time." I laughed softly. "I'll hold you to that." Her husband leaned into frame, smiling. "She's been knitting again," he said. "Now we know why." Ludmila wiped her tears, shaking her head. "Come for New Year's. I'll make soup. I'll knit socks. I just want to hold your hands." When the call ended, I sat there in quiet awe, feeling the full circle of it all. the dinner that had started in judgment now ending in warmth. The same woman who once questioned my worth now waiting to wrap my child in a blanket of her making. Later that night, I stood on our balcony. The city stretched beneath us, the faint hum of traffic, the smell of rain, the golden lights reflected on wet pavement. Andre came up behind me, his hands sliding around my waist. "We did it," he whispered. "We're still doing it," I corrected softly. He smiled against my neck. "You know, my mother told me once that marriage means learning to speak each other's language. I think we both learned a few extras." I turned to face him, resting a hand on his chest. "Italian, love, patience, forgiveness," I said. "All the same grammar, really." He laughed quietly. "And what's the word for finally being understood?" I thought for a moment, then answered, "Home." When the year turned, Milan's skies lit up with soft fireworks. I stood by the window, Andre's arm around me, feeling the tiny heartbeat of the life we'd created. The soundless proof that beginnings never really end. They just change shape. We weren't just husband and wife anymore. We were the sum of every choice that led us here. The calm defiance at that dinner table, the leap toward Milan, the forgiveness that built bridges across pride. Love, I realized, isn't about choosing a person once. It's about choosing them every day, especially when the language changes. And as the first dawn of the new year washed through our apartment, Andre whispered, "Buon anno, amor." I smiled. "Happy new beginning."